we're very pleased with just how much grade we're seeing. Just the fact that everything seems to carry mineralization. So it's a very fertile system. And
CEO Brian Miller of Astra Exploration is here to discuss the drill results released on March the 19th that included zero point 0.5 meters of 2,371 grams per ton of silver. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. Please remember, this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. Brian, nice that we were finally able to find a meeting time with our busy schedules.
indeed, it's been a pretty crazy week, but in a good way.
All right. You were just not to get off the topic, but you just came back from some European marketing. How did that go? And what are the views in with the investors you saw in Europe?
Yeah, we were at the Swiss Mining Institute in Zurich for a couple of days. It was a fantastic conference. I think we took just over 40 meetings in a 2-day period. Several of those were with multiple investors, so I think our head count was close to 100. We got in front of some very good investors. One of the most favorable things was that most people hadn't heard the story, and the reviews were great. People were excited about it. Overall sentiment is still very bullish. I think people are using the current pullback right now as a buying opportunity. So, um, you know, full speed ahead.
All right. And you got some news to go along with it. So why don't you give us a quick overview of the results, and then you've got a few slides here to really show how it all interacts and the model that's developing from your various drill programs you've had over the last while.
Yeah, I guess I'll start out just the summarization here with the developments at La Manchuria. There's really two things going on here. Um, just to reiterate, we've got 10,000 meters of drilling planned. We've completed 5,000 meters. That's what the results here are for those first 5,000 meters, and we'll start that second half, that next 5,000 meters here in just a couple, 3 weeks. But the idea was that first 5,000 meters were shallow holes targeted near surface to really demonstrate the much larger footprint of this system. Because there's really two things going on. There's a bulk disseminated system at surface, so this is a very dense system of narrow veinlets with high grade. And then beyond that, you've got the feeder zone targets, if you will, those coalescing veins at depth that you have concentrated areas of high grade. So there's two targets that are being advanced in tandem. The main target is the high grade feeder, but as we're exploring for those, you're naturally drilling through that bulk disseminated system. So we're seeing both of those develop quite nicely. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through a set of slides here, and I've used this figure before. This is just a cartoon that I've got pulled up here. It's the general anatomy of an epithermal system. High in the system, you've got narrow veinlets that have high grades, but they're very dense. And so this is the part of the system that you can potentially open pit mine. And as you move down through the system, these veinlets, these narrow veinlets that are 10, 20, 30 centimeters, they coalesce into thicker veins. And what we see at Manchuria is about 1 to 2 meters thickness. And this is occurring anywhere between 75 meters to 150 meters below depth. And then the part of the system that's never been explored at La Manchuria are the high-grade feeder zones. And so what we want to see are those 1 and 2 meter thick veins that are coalescing at depth. And so I'm just going to go right to an image. This was pulled directly. This is from the news release that we just put out. Uh, but I want to talk about a few things. And first of all, I'll talk about the high grade feeder zones and how this thing is developing. And most of this all is in the main zone here. And we've got this kind of broken up into a few parts. This green area that I just pulled up, we'll call this the eastern feeder. This is something that's been referred several times, east feeder. And then orange, we've got a central feeder. And in blue, we've got a west feeder. And then one of the most recent discoveries that we announced earlier this month, the Basalto zone, this was a blind vein discovery, 6.3 meters at 837 grams silver, about 20 meters beneath surface. And so these are kind of the three areas that, or the four areas right now that I want to focus on with this feeder system that we're talking about. And I'll pull up a cross section here that's from this dark dashed line. And so again, this lays out all the systems from southwest to northeast, Basalto, Main, Eastern, and Road. And what we're seeing here with the east feeder, again, color coded, so this makes it easier. You see these veins, they're dipping toward each other, converging at depth here. And the basalto zone with hole 129 in this news release, it does indeed look like it is also dipping toward the rest of the system into that convergence area. That's exactly what we want to see for the high grade feeder targets. This is occurring at about 180 meters beneath surface, so still very shallow. And in addition to that, these purple areas that pop up on the plan map here, this basalto zone lies on a different strike than what the rest of the veins do. So it looks like it's also converging along strike to the southeast. And these convergence areas are always tend to be highly prospective for the concentrated areas of high grades. So there's a lot of things coming together quite nicely with this high grade feeder zone target. This is all laid out along a strike in the main zone. This arrow, we've got 750 meters of vein strike established so far. It's completely open in both directions. I'll remind our listeners here that it was previously interpreted that this system was cut off. You see these flashing dark lines here in the middle of this. There are two faults here, and it was previously thought that the system was faulted off on both ends. But we now have certainty. We knew we had vein strike established to the northwest. With this news release in these holes, we now have established that we have high-grade vein strike to the northwest. We've also got vein strike to the southeast. So we've got about 750 meters of strike established there. And this thing, not only do we have this convergence area now that looks like it's developing nicely, but it's also developing on a growing strike that's completely open in all directions. This is a long section that lies northwest southeast, and some of our viewers are familiar with this. We've had this image in several of the news releases, but I want to talk about this quickly to kind of show people where we're at in the system because we have different levels. There's uplifted blocks and down thrown blocks in this thing. And so this main zone here, what we're looking at is we've got narrow veinlets at surface and they're coalescing into thicker structures at depth. So we are through kind of that transition zone, but not yet into the high grade feeder zone. To the northwest, this is on a down thrown block. So you're still high level in the system. You're seeing narrower veins. You're seeing the upper levels of this system. And with this release with hole 131 and 132, we now know that we have good grades out in that area as well. So it's really encouraging to see those kind of grades that high in the system. And then to the southeast, down thrown blocks again yet. So we still think we're high in the system there. We've got those narrow veinlets. So really encouraging. We've got this thing open along strike and at depth. And again, that 700 meters of strike, all of that is within that small area in the center of the claim group. You've got several kilometers in any direction along strike before you get to a claim boundary. And we know the system is opened up in all of these areas in yellow. And then quickly here, I want to go back and I want to talk about the eastern feeder in the main zone, this green shaded area, and hole 130 in particular, because this was a step out hole, a pretty substantial step out hole from this fault southeast. And this was in an area that was previously unexplored. So we hit several intervals of grade, including a really high grade interval, half a meter at 11 grams gold and 2,300 grams silver. It is a narrow interval, but again, we're high in that system. We expect some of the veins to be narrower. But what I think is really encouraging, and this is an interpretation so far, but I think it's an encouraging one. A lot of our viewers will remember that hole 108 was our best hole in the inaugural drill program where we discovered the argentum vein. The grades here are strikingly similar as far as the gold to silver ratio and the grade. This at hole 130 could potentially be an extension of that argentum vein to the southeast, about 220 meters step out along strike, and again, everything open to the southeast. So a lot of good developments with this set of drill holes here. And, you know, that's really to say nothing about the holes in the eastern zone that have all intersected several intervals of silver and gold grade, and again, high in the system. So a lot of things opened up here with this set of drill holes. We're quite happy with this development.
You've got some narrower intercepts and some wider ones as well, all very high grade. The relationship to where those thicker intercepts and those thinner ones are, how does that help fit into the model or explain the model, if that's clear?
Yeah, I think so. It's actually a good point since I've got hole 108 pulled up here. Um, Hole 108 was drilled about 80 meters beneath a historical drill hole that had intersected a series of narrow veinlets that had some interesting grade. So these narrow veinlets were about 20 meters from surface, and if I recall correctly, I think it produced an interval of 2 meters at 2 gram gold and 300 gram silver. And that was because of a series of narrow veinlets. Hole 108 was placed 80 meters beneath there, and it intersected this 4.4 meter interval, and most of that grade came from a single vein that was 1.4 meters thick. And so those narrow veinlets did actually coalesce into a thicker vein in about 100 meters elevation change. And so that was kind of the first confirmation that we've got the veinlets that coalesce in these thicker veins. And now we're seeing these 1 to 2 meter thick veins, mostly, like I said, over here in the main zone, that look to be converging at depth as well. And that's the part of the story that's never been explored. That's kind of the more exciting drill target for the upcoming program.
And given the lines, the angles of convergence, what are you guesstimating or where that zone of convergence could be with the wider intercepts and the feeder zone? How deep could that possibly be?
Of course, there's several assumptions, and a lot of this is projection. We've got
Of
the
course.
vein dip that's going right now, and then vein dips can change. But
Yes.
currently, it's looking like I said in that image that I showed earlier, we're looking at about 180 to 200 meters depth is where we're at right now, and so we could see that convergence at call it 300 to 400 meters.
Yeah.
We don't know, and we also don't know if those 1 to 2 meter veins actually converge into one single vein, or if they even just get close together or close enough together that you've got a concentrated interval of very high grade, which we have seen that already. There's a couple intervals so far produced here that I think one of them was 20 meters at 10 gram gold and 800 gram silver, and that was a series of parallel veins. And there was another one that was 7 meters at 17 gram gold that was again a series of close parallel veins. So
All right. And I'm always curious, your geophysical modeling that you did ahead of time, is it correlating like is it does it correlate well with what you're actually finding on the drill results and that help maybe raise confidence in your other geophysics that you've got mapped out elsewhere?
yes, the geophysics were actually a big part of this. So we did a small portion of a survey, or we did a small survey to really see if it was going to be a good model for mapping the mineralized veins beneath the cover, because most all of this is concealed by either a shallow modern cover or post-mineral volcanics. And the geophysical survey from the first 5,000 meters worked very well. And so we do have the crews on the ground. They're actually just wrapping up the geophysics right now. We're waiting on processing and results, but we'll have that geophysical survey extended to the southwest over those basalts and to the north along that strike that's opening up to the northwest. So I think that that's going to be a really powerful tool for mapping the veins going forward.
You're drilling through the andesilic sill to get to your vein targets, correct? That was the old uh that was the old target of historical drilling. As you're, do I have that right?
Yes, there's a lower rock unit that was always thought to be non-productive. So whenever the drill bit hit that rock unit, they just stopped. And we
Yeah.
actually threw that in a couple places and we're back into the good host rock.
Yeah. Okay. And you're thinking there's potentially some valuable mineralization in that as well?
There's definitely valuable mineralization in the favorable host rock, but what we're also seeing is some of those andesites actually do host very high grade. We still
Yeah.
haven't figured that part of the puzzle out. That's ongoing, but it's quite encouraging to have high grade mineralization in yet another unit of rock.
And have you now finished your first 5,000 meters? Are there any more drill holes to be released from that? And the next set is the next 5,000 meters of drilling that's going to be starting in April.
Yes, we've completed the first 5,000 meters. There are still 5 holes pending. We're hoping to have
Oh,
those back and out shortly, and then we'll
yeah,
commence with the next at least 5,000 meters here in, like I said, just a couple 3 weeks. We're
yeah.
finalizing mobilization plans now.
Your final drill plans, are you going to wait until you get those drill results back to really accumulate all the data before putting the precise new drill plans in, or are you pretty sure for your first holes, you know exactly where you're going at this point?
I do think that there are going to be some drill holes, regardless of what comes back in the next 5 holes. There are going to be some drill targets that are a given based on what we've seen right now. But yeah, it certainly depends. You can have a drill hole that changes everything.
Yeah, yeah. And this past drill, these first 5,000 meters were all pretty shallow, around 200 meters per hole, ish. How much deeper is this new round of drilling going to be?
Yeah, the first 5,000 meters that we completed, a lot of that was 50-meter vertical depth down to about 200 was the
Yeah.
range there. We will have some deeper holes in this next campaign, and when I say deeper, that's very much a relative term. Like I said, we're still looking at 200 to 300 meters, but we'll also be doing some step outs. Like I mentioned, that northwest extension, those are very shallow. So to test the step out along strike there, you're going to be starting with, call it 75 to 100 meter drill holes.
All right. And are we expecting to get the results from those final 5 drill holes out before the new drilling begins?
Yes, I would.
Okay. All right. And then with those next 5 drill holes out, are you going to be releasing some news on like an overview of the drill, the second phase of that 5,000 meter drill plan?
Yes, we will be putting out some news, as far as the targets, what we're looking at. I think we'll probably put out some results for the geophysical survey. We'll see, if we I'm a bit cautious sometimes to put out geophysical results because they can be very relative. But whereas we've been progressively demonstrating with the geophysics how they correlate with the known veins, and if we can demonstrate that and extrapolate that out into the survey in a way that is communicable, because it does get kind of tricky, we will certainly put that out.
All right. Any things that we haven't covered off of this news release that you'd like to highlight before we wrap things up?
I think just to summarize, we're very pleased with just how much grade we're seeing. Just the fact that everything seems to carry mineralization, and what we published in the results table is simply everything that was elevated grades. But there's so many intervals here that fall below cutoff. We use a cutoff of about a half a gram, and so you do see a lot of intervals that are zero point 0.4, zero point 0.3. So it's a very fertile system, and I would say that even Diego was surprised at just how much of it was mineralized. So pleasantly, of course, but nonetheless, it still continues to impress us.
Excellent. Brian, thank you for the update. Much appreciated.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Martin.